When I was living in London, I lived on the Isle of Dogs, and I'd released probably the second edition of From Hell. I'd just moved in with who was my now wife, and we lived in it was called Burrell's Wharf, and it was an old printing factory. So it was very post-Victorian, old industrial type buildings. I was doing the From Hell cards in the kitchen, so I was just laying out the actual mortuary photographs of the Jack the Ripper victims, and I was there squirting blood on them hour after hour after hour. And around that time, spooky things started to happen in the house. For example, my wife would get up and go to work in the morning, and she had to be in work earlier than me, so I would lie in bed and I would feel someone come in and come and sit on the end of the bed, and I would roll over and there was no one there, but there was an imprint of somebody sitting on the end of the bed in the bedroom in broad daylight as well. Another time, something tried to get into bed with me by actually folding the duvet back on its own. I could actually see the duvet lift as if somebody was trying to get into bed. And then there was slight poltergeist activity as well. There was all sorts of pots and pans and jugs flying around, glasses smashing. In the end, I actually asked it to stop and kind of, leave us alone, and it did. But it was only a few years later when I kind of thought that, was it because I was doing these cards in a place where, I was only a stone's throw from where the actual Whitechapel murders happened, in terms of maybe a mile and a half away? Was there a connection where the building I was with maybe one of the Jack the Ripper victims, which I was unaware of historically? But it did seem that when I was doing that, it was creating waves in a sort of paranormal and turning it into a paranormal type event.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Desert Island Tricks. If you were listening to this during its intended release date, then you'll know today is a very special day. It is a very spooky day. That's because this is going out on Halloween in 2025. So I thought maybe we need to get a special guest on, someone who will be able to put us in that Halloween mood and hopefully give us a little bit of insight into bizarre magic. Now, I'm going to give you a little bio of today's guest because the things that he's done are phenomenal. If you haven't seen his stuff, please, please, please do go and see it because it's phenomenal. But let me tell you about him first. So, he is the founder of Lebanon Circle, which, if you haven't heard of it, create incredibly detailed props and effects normally based around the macabre. Dan started making props to take his mind away from the things he was dealing with when working in forensics in London, and since then he's made incredible props for the likes of the BBC, Warner Brothers, FX, Channel 4 and the History Channel. He runs workshops where he teaches prop making and illusion design as well as 3D modelling and artistic fabrication. He's even had his props featured in some notable exhibitions, including the Guillermo del Toro at Home with the Monster and the Museum of Contemporary Art in New York. I'm sure this is going to be a phenomenal list. I'm sure this is going to be a bit of a deviation to other lists. I know that we've had some spookier guests on before, but if you've seen Dan's props, they are absolutely incredible. You will not find many props quite to the standard that Dan creates them. So please do go check out Lebanon Circle if you are wanting to explore any of this anymore. But I'm babbling on, so let's get him on now. This is Dan Baines. Hello, Dan.
Hi there, Jamie. Thank you for having me, and thank you for that excellent introduction.
Well, it feels like since I've known about Lebanon Circle, anyone in the bizarre community in particular really holds Lebanon Circle to a high standard, and that's for a good reason, because you don't often get props in our industry which are made with the detail. I mean, we said that these have been in art exhibitions, but these are museum quality props. These are film and TV quality props that you're making and that are put into the hands of performers around the world. So I just think it's amazing that you've managed to build this up from such a negative thing, working on the forensics to where you are now.
It's one of those strange things that, when you say museum quality or art gallery property, quite a lot of my effects just go straight into someone's man cave behind, into a display cabinet, and they will stay there forever. But I would say maybe 30 to 40% of my effects are bought by professional magicians and used in shows, all around the world, and, quite established shows as well. So it's kind of, it's that balance. I like having my stuff displayed and maybe not used. I don't care, but equally I like to see it used in shows as well.
So, what was it about the macabre? So, how did you get to a stage where you were creating darker tricks instead of other props? What about that genre took you?
Well, I've only ever produced dark stuff, funnily enough. Even from a very early age, I've always been interested in the spooky, the paranormal. It's one of those typical 1970s, 1980s upbringings where your parents just let you watch anything you want on TV. And there was no censorship really. And, you get home from school after Grange Hill, or, there'd be a ghost story on TV or something creepy. Which you just don't get anymore. So I've always had that interest. But in terms of magic, I never had an interest in magic as a child. That is purely something that came at a later date when I was in my mid-20s. But I've always been interested in everything spooky and strange.
Well, that's even grown on to, you hold an event now, which is, I've never had the chance to go to it, but a lot of people in the UK hold it as one of the highlights of their year. So how did you take it from just Lebanon Circle to a whole convention?
Okay, so Doomsday started, I think we're in our 15th year now, skipping out COVID. And that was started by Ronnie Shacknai, who is a very well-known person, or was a very known person in Bizarre Magic. And it started at Sneaton Castle in Whitby, quite apt for something, spooky, on the cliffs overlooking the beach where Dracula washed ashore. So we started it there. I went to the very first one, and I think the very first one, there was probably about 25 people there. It was very, very small. And over the years, it's just generated more and more interest. I mean, Bizarre Magic is a kind of niche area of magic. It's, there's not a huge amount of people in there. But people now, as it stands now, come from all over the world to the event. So I would say out of everyone there, at least 50% of them are international, visitors. So it's got a name for itself now as probably one of the best Bizarre Magic conventions in the world. There's ECSS also in America, East Coast Spirit Sessions, which we like to see as like the sort of the sister of Doomsday. It kind of created sort of in conjunction with each other, and we kind of flip between the two as guests and as performers. But now it's held every year in May in Derby, because it's nice and central. Everyone can kind of get there relatively easy, and it's got good connections with America and Europe, obviously with all the airports in the area. And I ran it single-handedly for almost 12 years. And it's just got to the stage now where I just need that help. My life as an artist has kind of got busier and busier and busier, and I'm not an events organizer. I'm not very kind of wired that way. Although I found it enjoyable, but I found it incredibly stressful. So now we've actually got our own little committee of people, and it runs autonomously. It's great. And so the dates for this year are, I think it's May the 16th, 17th. I would need to check that, but it's around those dates. But all the information is on doomsdaygathering.com, and the tickets are available now for next year's convention. and we've got Richard Wiseman as one of the main guests there. So it's and Rhys Shearsmith is always likes to come along and usually judge the Hex Factor, which is our little talent contest, which is lots of fun. So, but yeah, everyone there is welcome, and I think everyone who comes always wants to come back. So it's almost like you're part of a weird family. It's like the Addams family, but international.
Great. So, last question before we get into your list is how did you make the leap from making these props for performers to making them for TV and larger events? What was that journey?
It just came really naturally. I think the main thing that I did that really catapulted me into the public eye was the Derbyshire mummified fairy hoax that I did in 2007. So up until then, I was writing sort of small PDF documents on how to create your own sort of illusions, like Ghost in the Machine, for example, based on Edison's machine to communicate with the dead. And I was just selling those for like a £5 on eBay as like a downloadable document. And as you say, at the time I was working in forensics in London, and I just did this kind of, I wasn't really thinking about what I was doing. I just created I made a small plastic skeleton, wrapped it in paper mache made out of a toilet roll I'd nicked from the works bathroom, put it in an airing cupboard and opened it up the next day, and I had this like mummified body, which I decided to turn into a fairy, write a whole news article about it, and then pitch it to all of the newspapers for an April Fool's hoax. But none of the UK papers were interested in it. So I took it straight to America, and they fell for it straight away, and it went viral. And I think it was probably one of the first viral internet sort of hoaxes at the time. And that just made me sort of, famous overnight. The Lebanon Circle website at the time was pretty small. And yeah, it was guerrilla marketing, really. It just took something from a little hobby I was doing to kind of just fund my beer money while I lived in London, and also keep my mind on the straight and narrow, into what would eventually become a full-time business, which has so many different facets to it. But because I was building these props that look so kind of ornate and gothic, it also attracted the attention of film studios and TV companies. And I also did a few little hoaxes on the side as well around some of these objects I'd created, and people just thought they were real, when of course they weren't. So eventually, I found that a lot of Hollywood directors have their own little collections, their own little man caves, where you have a party at your house, and you say to your friends, "Do you want to come and see something really weird?" And you go into like a secret room in the house, and it's just full of all these strange artifacts and just relics that they've collected throughout the years. And most of my stuff goes into those types of collections. So it's kind of a backdoor into the film industry. It's just directors and producers and writers who've bought my stuff, and then through that I've been introduced to people in the film and TV industry that way.
Yeah, amazing. Wow. I love the idea of the hoaxes. Have you ever tried to get one of your props into a museum, but as an authentic item? That would be great.
No, but museums have bought my props to use as authentic items, believe it or not.
Oh, wow.
So,
yeah. Have you got an example of one?
I have, yeah. So I made an effect years ago called Crux Residual Ectometron, which was a machine that would actually materialize a ghost in a chamber, which you could then communicate with. And it would be like this swirling mist in a glass tube. It was all very steampunk. And that's, in fact, one of the versions that toured in the At Home with Monsters with Guillermo del Toro's exhibition. And this guy was like... he said, I'm going to put this in my museum. And I said, well, it's not actually an original piece. And he says, yeah, but the people who come to my museum don't know that. So there's one sat in, I think it's a spiritualist museum in America. I can't say which one, where it is, but yeah, it's a spiritualist museum which will have loads of stuff from the Fox sisters and original Ouija boards. And in there is that machine that to communicate with the dead, which is pitched as an original piece.
The Warrens Museum has just been handed over to some celebrity TikTokers, so maybe it's time we get some Lebanon Circle stuff into the Warrens Museum. The original occult museum would be great to see one of your pieces in.
It would be nice to just sort of, deposit something in there. But who knows, there's places in the world. I've sold so much stuff over the years that stuff just could be, in a museum. I was going around, I was at Disney at the weekend, and I went through the Phantom Manor, and I swear to God there was one of my Dolly Darko dolls on the shelf in there. Because it's so dimly lit, I just couldn't make it out. But it just looked like it was. But that wouldn't surprise me, because I've had friends before who have found their items that they've created in Disney shops and part of, dressing some of the Disney displays. So it could be. I just have to go back and have a look. Unfortunately, we left after that, but it could be in there somewhere.
Which Disney was it?
Disneyland Paris.
Right, so here's the thing. If you're listening to this and you live near Disneyland Paris, or you're going to Disneyland Paris, you have to find out whether that is a Dolly Darko. So, get a sneaky picture and send it in to us, and we can send it on to Dan, and we'll find out whether that is one. What's the strangest request that you've had to make something?
I mean, I get a lot of requests to make mummified body parts. I'm quite good at... I've sort of honed my skills on making realistic mummies. I've done pickled babies in jars before. I also had a mummified head get picked up by Australian customs to the point where they were going to do me for importing human remains into Australia. And that was actually featured in the Fortean Times magazine. So I had to, they rang me up and I said to them, I asked them if any of them had done biology at school, to which they said yes. And I said, well, you need to go back and look at that head and tell me what's wrong with it. So they went back and they kind of scratched their heads and came back, and they couldn't figure out what was wrong with it. And because it was an early prototype mummified head I'd made, I'd forgot to put the ears on it, so it had no ears. And I said, well, it's not a real human head because it's got no ears on it. But I tend to model things around, so if I'm going to create a mummified head, I will create it around a human skull. Obviously not a bone one, but I'll model it around the original bone structure and everything to keep it as realistic as possible. But yeah, I get all sorts of, people have asked me if I could do a From Hell deck with real human blood. I've had that before. I said I'm not that keen on blood, to be honest, which is strange, having worked in forensics, which is the whole reason why I'm not keen on blood anymore. I've kind of seen too much of it. And when I asked them where I was going to get the blood from, they said if I could supply my own, and I was just like, no, I'm not having my DNA all over a deck of Jack the Ripper cards. So that's probably one of the strangest things I've had.
Wow, that is bizarre. So I think maybe we should get into the podcast. So if this is your first time listening, the idea is we're about to maroon Dan on his very own magical island. When he's there, he's allowed to take 8 tricks, banish 1 item, take 1 book and 1 non-magic item that he uses for magic. Particulars: who's there, what's there, are there skeletons there, are there caves there, are there pumpkins? Who knows? It's in Dan's own imagination. So let's go to your rather spooky island, Dan, and find out what's in position number 1.
Number 1 would be the traditional spirit cabinet routine. And just seeing that when I was younger. Even though as a child I never had a huge interest in magic, I still used to watch things like Paul Daniels and stuff at the weekends. You know, after Russ Abbott or those types of things, there'd be magic on TV. And I remember seeing a spirit cabinet routine. It was probably for a Halloween special, and I'm pretty sure it's Paul Daniels. It might have been someone else, but it just the fact that there's all these things flying around, and there was a woman bound behind the curtain, and then there'd be bells ringing and things flying around, and you rip the curtain back and she's still exactly where she was. As a child, that really it did spook me a little bit, because I thought, well, there's got to be a real ghost there. So I kind of fell for it, hook, line and sinker, in the same way that most of the Victorians did. And I think that was my first introduction to spooky magic, and that performance really stuck with me. So sort of the Davenport brothers traditional routine. I still love a spirit cabinet routine, even though I know exactly how it all works. I've even had a go at creating my own miniature ones, which have been quite good fun. But yeah, definitely the spirit cabinet.
Yeah, so I remember seeing, I think the one that was on Paul Daniels was the Willard, Falkenstein and Willard one, which I also remember seeing and thinking it was phenomenal. Is this something that, so you mentioned that you've made little ones. Have you ever tried building a large full-size one?
No, that's the thing. I do get a lot of requests to make full-size props, but I'm very much a small-scale person. I like to work in not miniature scale, but within, I don't know, something manageable. I'm not into doing full stage props for sort of, West End show size, or for people to like get into. It's just my skills aren't really in that area. But I've made ones around sort of a square foot size, like with Dolly Darko, for example. The haunted doll, she had her own little spirit cabinet, which was called the Theatre of Souls, and she would throw things out. You'd close the curtains and she'd roll a ball out from under the curtain and things like that. So that's where the inspiration was. I much prefer things on a smaller scale. So when I'm thinking of where it's going to be performed, it's always in a small, cozy, almost parlor type environment, and never visualize anything big on stage. I'm always in like some back corner of a spooky bar, or somewhere like that. So everything's like on a much smaller scale.
I think the really interesting thing about the spirit cabinet as well is there's not many tricks in bizarre magic that would equate to a stage magician's prop, like a zigzag illusion or something like that. Whereas obviously spirit cabinet is that large scale routine. But what I love about it, having someone who's built a full size one, is you're building a prop that does nothing. It quite literally just sits there and someone sits inside it. It has no real autonomous use within the show. It's just sort of there to cover someone up.
Yeah, it is just like four legs with curtains on, which for me would be incredibly boring to make anyway. But I work, in my other studio, which is down in Tunbridge Wells. That was originally a prop design studio that did all things for the West End. So they're all very capable of building things like that. So if I ever get a client who says, "Can you build me a glass coffin that I'm going to get buried alive in," or whatever, they're the people I direct them to. But it's definitely something I couldn't touch. I need to have something a little bit more fiddly and that sparks the imagination a bit more, I think.
Well, I think it's a great entry in at number 1. So let's find out where you went with number 2. What's in your second spot?
Okay, the second one is very closely related. You're going to see a trend here, and it is sort of Victorian séance magic. So, so spirit slates, which I love spirit slates, but I actually hate making them because I've made thousands and thousands of sets of them. But I do like a good spirit slate routine, and for me as well, it's the when you see someone who's never seen a spirit slate routine before, it still kind of mystifies them, I think. And that's what I really like about this sort of the old Victorian style seance magic, because it's old, it's forgotten about. People don't want to use threads and wires and magnetic flaps anymore. And it's kind of what I do is kind of keep those old methods alive. And because they're old and everyone's always, it's the cult of the new. They want to find new ways and electronics and blah, blah, blah. But then you bring back these old methods that were used back at, in the early 1900s. They still work today. And a good set of spirit slates. So, but as I say, I kind of have to have a break now and again from making them.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing with spirit slates, I know Terry Tyson has some work on using flapless spirit slates and some very cool displays with spirit slates and stuff like that. And I think in Seance magazine they had some really interesting approaches for it. But I've seen the quality of yours firsthand, and they are amazing. They really do look like something that, Salem witch trial, someone saved that could go into a museum. They look that authentic and real. They're phenomenal.
Thank you. Well, it's one of those things I spend most of my time destroying stuff, which reflects my personality as well. I'm kind of quite self-destructive, and when it comes to being an artist, I like to get rid of my artwork. I always have done. I've never been one for keeping my own art and treasuring it and displaying it. I'd rather someone have it and destroy it, because if I have it for too long, I'll just break it apart and do something else with it. So when someone asks me to make them a set of spirit slates, I spend hours getting the frame exactly as it should be, and then I spend 10 minutes just beating the hell out of it with lumps of rock, scratching it, hammering all sorts of, even like little bits of graffiti into it to make them look original. So, but that's not the look some people want either. Some people do like the pristine type of spirit slate. But if you get the spirit slates from me, they're going to look like they've been in like the Barnardo school in London, so at the Ragged School. They're going to look like some kid's been using them for 30 years and it's exchanged hands many times. But that's the aesthetic a lot of bizarre magicians like. They need it to look authentic, I suppose.
This was quite literally a conversation I was having last week with Chris Mallon from Strange Stage, which is another bizarre prop making company that makes amazing props. But we said it's almost soul destroying that you buy something which is super expensive and brand new, and you take it home, and on the side there's a big pot of sandpaper that you're about to take to that prop, and you just destroy the hell out of it. And it's literally heartbreaking when you do it, but it's so worth it by the end of it if you've got a really good product.
It makes each piece unique as well, because they're all going to get a different beating depending on how I feel that day. So depends if you're annoyed or not. So exactly, yeah.
I normally have devil's advocate. Now, most guests we have will pick an item like a deck of cards or a certain kind of wallet, and we like to play devil's advocate to get a routine out of them. So, if I was to hold you to one way of using spirit slates, how would you use them if you could only do one thing with them?
Well, the slates I make are quite unique in that they actually create the sound of the chalk writing inside, which makes them quite different, and they vibrate as well. So if you give them to a spectator, they can feel the chalk writing inside, which is quite eerie, and it gets loads of great reactions. And I don't think it doesn't matter what message is written in there, but just that feeling or seeing the spectator hold them and them being able to feel the chalk writing as well as hear it, for me, just takes the illusion just that one little step further into kind of the uncanny, even more spooky element. So that would be the one thing that if I would do it, that's the way I would perform it. with the sound and the vibration, and just push it that little bit further.
Great. Well, that is a great entry in at number 2. So let's go to number 3. So what's in your third spot?
Number 3 is it's not actually it's a stage illusion which I saw, which I actually turned into an illusion. I kind of looked at it and then thought how I could utilize that. And that was, I went to see Lord of the Rings, the musical, many years ago. And as you were waiting to go down to your seats, there was hobbits running around around the stalls with nets, trying to catch fireflies. And there was these little fireflies just dancing in the air all over the stage. And of course, I was trying to work out how they created the illusion of these fireflies. And they were just like long fishing rods with fiber optic cable, sheathed fiber optic cable, with just the end exposed. And of course, you just waggle the rod and you get like this little dancing light, and the hobbits would catch them in the nets. And I just thought that would be great if you were kind of doing a blackout séance type of show. Or not even blackout, really. You can do it. And so I created something called the corpse candle, which is just based on that idea. And it just gives you the ability to take a jar on stage. For example, you could say it's got a trapped will-o'-the-wisp or a fairy in there, and you could just open the lid. And as long as you've got an assistant who's preferably dressed all in black with a black rod, you can make this small point of light manifest on the stage, and it can fly around and you can perform with that. So it's almost like taking the thumb tip light, the D light thing, but making it completely hands-free. So you could even combine the two if you wanted. You could have it and then let it go and it would fly off, and then it would kind of just reappear. And so I actually, on my website, actually, you can just go and download the free document for that. I actually just released it as a free download not long ago, actually, because I just was digging through my archive and I found it and just gave it away. And so people are using it as well, which is quite nice. But you do have to have that really dark, almost, very, very dimly lit environment to use it. But I think it goes in at my number 3 because it was one thing that I saw that wasn't magic, but really made me think, how the hell are they doing that? Which is what I suppose magic is meant to do. But it was used as a stage illusion as opposed to actually a magic trick that's performed.
Well, I think that sounds super interesting. And I think something you touched on there accidentally, the crossover between theatre and bizarre magic, because bizarre magic is, in essence, it doesn't have to be scary magic. It's just storytelling magic. It's narrative-driven magic. And it sounds like you're very much like me in the sense that any opportunity I can see a weird theatre show or an interesting theatre show or just something a bit out there, I love it. And I never got the chance to see Lord of the Rings, a musical, because there was a bit... I distinctly recall someone's leg being trapped in a revolve or something, and them having to close it a bit earlier. I don't
think it lasted very long. It never came back, put it that way.
No. I think they had the same thing. They had Spider-Man, the musical, a few years ago, Turn Off the Dark, I think it was called, in New York. And lots of people got very injured from that because they had people flying across the stalls. And yeah, interesting. But... so literally a few months ago, I saw a haunted play, and there was a very interesting effect in there where they had a real candle. They placed it down by on a ledge at the back of the stage, and whenever the spirit, or in this case it was a witch, would appear, the candle would mysteriously go out. And it was, we were only a few rows in, so the context of the show went out the window at that point, and my brain just went to, how is that candle constantly going out? Surely it's not a magic candle. They wouldn't, I just can't imagine a theatre show would do that. And there was a lovely moment where normally when the witch appears, there's this big noise and it makes you jump. This one time, there was no noise. because it was supposed to be like a delayed jump scare, but you did suddenly hear a fan blowing, and it was at that point that I realised there must have been a fan in the wall directly next to the ledge that the candle was on. It was blowing out. But it's so interesting how theatre props and effects can really influence the way that we build bizarre props in our sort of world.
Yeah, it's one thing you always have to take into consideration when you're designing anything, that if this was on stage, does it create any noise? Are there any parts of the electronics like solenoids, for example, that make the clicking sound? You just don't want that in the middle of a séance. It's like, hello, is anybody there? And it's like click sound. Just getting rid of problems like that. It's all problem solving. But yeah, when I go to see stage shows, my mind is very rarely following what's happening on stage. I'm too busy looking at the props and how things move, how the stage, shifts, and how they do scene changes. And that's where the interest is for me. Whereas my wife will get totally engrossed in the show. I'll miss the show and tell her about, how, for example, a candle gets blown out. Well, she's got no interest in that at all.
Okay, so we are going to put the corpse candle in at number 3, and let's move on to number 4. So what's in your 4th position?
Well, 4th position, it's hard because it's literally anything, any effect that's got the word haunted in it will automatically prick my ears up. And when I first started out in magic, that was just it, really. I was just interested with anything that had a haunted effect or a ghost or something, anything spooky. So the haunted key, for example, so basic, and so it's one of those things that people just within magic just look at it, but it's like any magic. You look at it and say, how the hell would anyone ever fall for something like this? But to the uninitiated, it does look like, haunted magic. Like haunted decks that cut themselves, all of that. So it would be anything that's got the word haunted in it. It would have been something in the past that I would have gone out and bought straight away. And then, parted with my money and got a sheet of A4 paper through the post and gone, damn, is that it? Which is one of the main things that got me into, illusion design anyway, because the illusion of an illusion is always far more than actually knowing the secret. I think, but when you know the secret, my brain kind of dissects what the original person did, the original designer. I just think, is there a new way to do that? Is there a different way round? Can I do this a different way? And that's kind of what fueled, Lebanon Circle, really, is just taking older ideas and doing something new with them. But they all started out from an interest in spooky magic, anything haunted. So yeah, the haunted key, I'll stick that in there because, I got it and I was like, really? But then I took it to work and I was performing it for all the secretaries where I was working in forensics. And they were like, oh my God, he's the devil, keep him away. And I was like, well, people generally think it's haunted. So, I'm not gonna tell them the secret. And and then haunted, decks that cut themselves, anything like that.
So you got yourself out of that one, because until the point where you said I would take the haunted key, I was going to make you take a haunted item. So we'll go for the haunted key. And I think what you just said again is really interesting. I think there's a kind of a fear with people who don't perform bizarre magic, who want to perform it, where a lot of the things are quite subtle. So, for example, the haunted key is subtle. But also we have pendulums, quite subtle, or we have planchettes that move. And a lot of the methods for these things rely on unexpected audience participation, we'll put it that way. And I think that magicians are scared that those things are too subtle or they won't work. So they don't go to it anymore. They're looking for the bigger movement or the bigger thing. Actually, there was a podcast I was listening to a little while ago, and they were talking about ghost stories, and they said one of the scariest ghost stories that they ever heard was a poltergeist who used to take plates out of the cupboard and place them in the floor of the kitchen. And they said the reason that it's so scary is because it's so mundane. It's such a random, boring thing to happen. Why would anyone fake that kind of thing? So I think that your haunted key effect, I think that's absolutely spot on. Now, my question for you is, if you were to use the haunted key in an effect, how would you use it? And do you have any advice for people that are worried about those tricks being too subtle in bizarre magic?
Subtle effects, or what I would term as easy effects. If it's too easy, some people are very cautious about using it. But with bizarre magic, I would say it's most of the performance is your ability to tell a good story. And you can tell a fantastically, spooky story and perform something that is so, if you were to perform it not in that environment, it would be completely uninspiring and not very exciting. But if you're telling this story around this haunted key, for example, and you perform it, and that's where the magic lies. It's the build up and the story around it, as opposed to just going, look at this haunted key, and it rolls over. You have like a story that draws people in, and it's all about your ability to be a good storyteller, I find. And I think that's one thing you really need to have in order to succeed in bizarre magic, is you have to be good at telling stories. You have to have the ability to engage with the audience and not worry so much about your magic skills. It's more about your ability to get the audience on board with what you're trying to tell them. And the haunted key, for example, it's used in so many sort of bizarre routines for opening locks, for example, a padlock that is previously locked, and you tell the story. Could be, I don't know, for example, someone is locked in a room, or a ghost of a girl was locked in a room, for example, and her ghost, she was left there to die, and this was the key that opened the lock, and then obviously the key rolls, the lock miraculously unlocks itself and then lets the spirit out, and then everyone's worried that the spirit of the girl's going to follow them home, and that type of thing. But there's so many ways to use it, and of course you don't always want it to roll straight away either. I think you've got to build up the tension. If you're getting volunteers out on stage and you're doing the actual effect where they're holding the key, have it not work a few times, in the same way that if you're going to do a séance, you're not always going to get a ghost come through. You need the right environment and the right people there. So kind of, pad it out a bit, stretch it out, and when it does happen, it makes it even more miraculous.
Well, that's an excellent entry in at number 4. So let's go to a number 5. What's in your 5th spot?
The 5th spot would be the original Out of This World routine. So people who don't know what the Out of This World routine is, it's when you get a mixed deck of cards, you create 2 piles, and when you flip them over, they've miraculously all sorted themselves into all reds and all blacks, which when I first came across it, I could have started a cult by doing this, around the office at work. But the great thing is, the one thing I really, really liked about it is, it's the fact that you as the magician don't have to do anything, and it's the person who is actually control or placing the cards. It makes them look like the one who's magic, which I always liked. I've never been a kind of egotistical type person, so I've never wanted to be the one who looks like, look at me, I'm amazing, I can make things float and all that. I'm more put these effects into the hands of someone else and make them look amazing, or make them question their own psychic abilities, and that's one effect that I did convert into the From Hell routine, which is the one that uses the Jack the Ripper victims and uses blood instead of, sorting out reds and blacks. It would be sorting out blank cards into cards that have actually physically got blood on them, which was incredibly popular. And I've spent countless evenings squirting blood on cards, more than I care to remember, to be honest. A kind of a spooky anecdote that goes with the From Hell cards. So when I was living in London, I lived on the Isle of Dogs, and I'd released, I think, probably the second edition of From Hell. And it was very popular, and I'd just moved in with who is my now wife. And we lived in it was called Burrell's Wharf, and it was an old printing factory. So it was very, post-Victorian, old industrial type buildings. At one point, supposedly all the pigeons around there were purple and green because it was a dye works. So all the dye would come out the chimney and dye all the pigeons different colours. So, but I started doing, in the kitchen. I didn't have a studio at the time, so I was doing the From Hell cards in the kitchen. So I was just laying out the actual mortuary photographs of the Jack the Ripper victims, and I was there squirting blood on them hour after hour after hour. And around that time, spooky things started to happen in the house. So, for example, my wife would get up and go to work in the morning, and she had to be in work earlier than me, so I would lie in bed. And I would feel someone come and sit on the end of the bed, and I would roll over and there was no one there, but there was an imprint of somebody sitting on the end of the bed in the bedroom in broad daylight as well. Another time, something tried to get into bed with me by actually folding the duvet back on its own. I could actually see the duvet lift as if somebody was trying to get into bed. And then there was slight poltergeist activity as well. There was all sorts of pots and pans and jugs flying around, glasses smashing, and it was all very odd. And in the end, I actually asked it to stop and kind of, leave us alone, and it did. But it was only a few years later when I kind of thought that, was it because I was doing these cards in a place where, I was only a stone's throw from where the actual Whitechapel murders happened, in terms of maybe a mile and a half away. Was there a connection where the building I was with maybe one of the Jack the Ripper victims, which I was unaware of historically? But it did seem that when I was doing that, it was making it was creating waves in a sort of paranormal type, and turning it into a paranormal type event. So, From Hell, Out of This World, and ghosts, it all kind of links together.
Makes me wonder if people have those From Hell cards at home. I wonder if they've experienced anything because of any attachment to those cards. I think that would be interesting. Have you ever had anyone message you and say, I bought one of your props, and since I've had it, this has been happening in my house?
I haven't, no, but I did see them on Come Dine With Me on Channel 4 once. So they were, when they split up and they go around the house, and this guy was a little bit weird, and they went into his bedroom and he had like the victim cards all on little photo stands. And I was like, they're my From Hell cards. So they were on Come Dine With Me. But I've never had anyone contact me and say, since I've bought your products, things have started to happen in my house. I think most people who buy my things tend to be quite spooky anyway, would embrace it. But I've not had nothing on the scale that I experienced when I was living in London, put it that way.
And did your wife experience the same kind of things?
She saw some things happen. Light switches would switch on and off, and we actually physically were kind of stood outside the bathroom. We actually watched the light switch just flick on and off on its own right next to us. So there definitely was something there. But the weird thing was it was all happening in broad daylight. It wasn't happening in the dead of night. It was all happening around sort of 7, 8 o'clock in the morning. And the weird thing is with the imprint on the bed, the first time it happened, it kind of freaked me out so much that I kind of got dressed, got ready for work, made the bed as I always do. And I'm kind of, because I'm ex-military, I always make sure the duvet is perfect. I pull it down so it's tight. I'm very sort of OCD when it comes to things like that. And when I came back from work, I was the first one back, and there was something sitting on the end of the bed again when I got in. It's like you can actually see the imprint of someone's backside on the bed, as if someone had been waiting for me to come home from work, which was really kind of a little bit unnerving. So yeah, it was strange.
Yeah, well, it sounds it. We've deviated away from the trick here. So let's get back onto the trick. So yes, Out of This World is a great one. I remember seeing Darren do his version many years ago when I was younger, where I think he quite literally just separated the living and the dead, or the spectator did. And ever since then, there has just been so many versions of this kind of routine. But the blood splatters, and the fact that I didn't know that they weren't printed, and you've actually made the blood splatters on the cards, which just shows
each individual
dedication.
Splatter has been put there by me. Yeah.
And here's my nerdy, bizarre follow-up. Do you have a blood mixture of your own?
No, but I do have what I believe is the perfect match for blood, but it took me a while to find it. And I'll reveal it on the show in case anyone wants to do it. But it's Winsor & Newton deep red ink. And you can just go and buy it from Hobbycraft. And it comes in a little box, and it's got a picture of a train on it. And that is the perfect match for blood. And believe me, I've seen plenty of it. To the point where I've spilt it on myself accidentally quite a few times, and then gone to pick the kids up from school, and because it's writing ink, it doesn't come off very well, so I look like I've been butchering somebody. But yeah, Winsor & Newton deep red writing ink, the perfect match for blood. And I suppose if you were going to mix it with a little bit of glycerine, it would have the same sort of texture as blood as well, the same, but don't get it on your hands because it does stain. But if you want something to look realistic as part of a prop, then it's very good blood.
Okay, well, everyone's gonna be making their own blood now, or maybe not. We'll find out. But also, if anyone has bought one of Dan's products and has had something spooky happen, please get in contact with him or us, because I think that would be super interesting to find out. And I wonder if there are bizarrists in general who, because they're dealing with these things all the time, they have more experiences than the general public. It would be so interesting to find out.
It would be interesting. It's also interesting to sort of, if I created a prop and then someone palmed it off to someone else as a haunted object, not knowing that it'd just been made about 3 weeks earlier in Kent, that they thought they actually had an original haunted object from, say, 1860, and then all of a sudden started to experience some sort of weird manifestation. That would be interesting to find out. I might even try it.
Do it. Do you know what you should do is there should be something about your products that allows people in the know to know that it's not a real one, so that if we go to like a museum and we see it, we go, that's Dan's prop, that one, and we can validate it straight away, and then we can let you know. We'll create a Lebanon Circle map of the world where there are just little pins where your props are in weird places.
Well, I have created a few as hoaxes. One thing I learned from the original mummified fairy hoax is never reveal it as a hoax, because, well, one, it can ruin your professional career, and two, people generally don't like being fooled, so you'll be the brunt of somebody's, for example, death threats and all sorts of things. So I have created things that have appeared in the news and globally, probably in the multitude of millions of times, and they're out there, that I've created that are touted as genuine objects, but I can't say what they are. But if you know me well, you'll probably be able to go out there and figure out which ones they are. But there's a few out there which, you can find instantly on the internet, which were my creations. But people think they are genuine.
So,
but I'll leave that for listeners to go and figure out for themselves.
Hello guys, I'm here to talk to you about Alakazam Unlimited. This is the best streaming platform in the world, I'm telling you now. With Alakazam Unlimited, you get access to over 150 magic routines. This is video performances and explanations. We have card magic, coin magic, kids magic, rope magic, mentalism, stage, parlor, impromptu. We've got you covered. All of this for the low price of just £4.99 a month. And you can cancel at any time. Perfect if you've got commitment issues. Yes, I'm talking to you. Guys, you are going to absolutely love it. If you haven't joined the platform already, what the heck are you doing? Alakazam Unlimited is a streaming platform that you need to be a part of. Not only that, there is also exclusive content only available on the platform. Check it out now, alakazam.co.uk. Cheers.
I was just going to say, let's all go out and let's find these. Let's find out what's real and what's not. Right, so let's move on. So we're on to number 6. What's in your 6th spot?
Number 6. Something really basic, but I just love them, and that's switch boxes. All magicians love boxes. Doesn't matter who. I think it's a male thing as well. Men love boxes. If you're not a magician, a man will have lots of boxes, sorting boxes. But for me, switch boxes, I love them. I've always made them. And I think the first one was the draw box, illusion, which kind of, when I first saw that, it really flummoxed me at first until I realized how it worked. But I loved the draw box, and then just switching methods in general. I just love a really nice, clean switch method that you're able to do so many things with it. There's not many effects I produce that don't at some point switch something out. So, but yeah, a good switch box. Yeah,
okay. So, Devil's Advocate's going to come out, Dan.
Okay.
If I gave you one routine to perform with your switch box, what would you do with it?
Okay. Well, over the years, I've tried to learn the tarot, but my brain, I think it's probably to do with age. My memory is terrible, and I've never found a tarot deck that I resonate with, which I think is what you've got to do. And I'm a good storyteller, but I'm just not that comfortable with using tarot cards, or at least giving someone a reading. So for me, one great thing is to give someone the tarot deck, let them shuffle it, deal 3 cards out. So you're going to give them a 3-card reading, and then you place the 3 cards in a box, and then boom, you switch it for 3 others that you know the exact reading of, so you've never had to learn the other 78 cards. You just learn, I don't know, let's give them a good reading. The Tower, the Devil and Death, for example. And then, so you can give the reading, and then you can take the cards out at the end and see how close your reading was to the cards they've selected. So that would be the one I would use. Partly because I'm too lazy to learn a full tarot deck in order to read them, and you only have to learn the 3 cards. But a few years ago, I produced a switch box, which was kind of new because it's actually got a glass lid on it. So what you would do is, for example, if we were going to do that switch that I've just spoken about, when the spectator puts their 3 cards in the box, you lock the box and you take the lid off, and there's just a glass panel, and you can say, there you go, you can see your 3 cards that you've just put in, and you just hold on to that box for now. The switch has already happened, so it's all done and dusted. But for the whole routine, they can see what they think is their cards in front of them at all times, and they can even unlock the box, take those 3 out, and it will be the 3 that were switched earlier. So I just like the idea of performing it so early on in the routine that it's done and dusted, and they're watching that object throughout the whole routine in the box. And it just kind of removes the fact that they didn't even see a switch happen, because as far as they're concerned, they just had their eyes on it throughout the whole performance, which makes it even more impossible. They don't look glass top. It's almost like it's a box with, it's got like another lid on top with a knob, and you just lift that off and there's a glass plate underneath. So, but yeah, they've been really popular purely for that reason, is that the switches perform so earlier on in the routine that people don't even remember a switch happened. As far as they're aware, you're just giving them a glass-topped box with their object in. But yeah, switch boxes all the way. Every man loves a box, and women, of course. I'm sure some women do.
Well, remind me never to book in a tarot reading with you. If I already know I'm going to get Death, the Tower, and the Devil, I don't want that reading. You can keep that reading. It's yours entirely. Great. So we are in the tail end of our 8 now. So we've got 7 and 8 to go. So what's in your 7th spot?
The 7th spot is my sort of, what we would call in the Navy is your sea dad, like the guy who took me under my wing when I was a very, sort of green magician or producer, Ronnie Shacknai. I met him one afternoon in London, and he went through every single routine he'd ever created, which I had a very bad headache at the end of the day, because he just bombarded me with all these methods and tricks and props that he'd created over, a multitude of decades. And he performed one trick for me called Skurrot, which he said was a cross between skull and tarot. And it was so basic. It was like a Halloween prop. It was one of those it was a skull that its eyes lit up red. It was something straight that you would find in B&M or, Dollar Tree. But it absolutely fooled me 100%. And out of everything he showed me that day, it was the one thing that stuck with me. And I just could not figure out how it was done. And it involved a tarot deck again. And it was... Basically, he had this skull of this mystic from the jungle, I think he said it was, who could predict the future. And he was going to prove it by basically giving me a deck of tarot cards. I would take out 3 cards, and the skull would jiggle and its eyes would light up, and it would predict the exact 3 cards that I'd taken from the tarot deck. And I could go back into the tarot deck, and those 3 cards that the skull had, predicted weren't in that deck. And it was an amazing effect. And it's just it. But again, it uses a very simple 3 outs method. That's all it was, which I'd never heard of. I had no clue whatsoever, and that's all it was. It was just. It was a deck switch and 3 outs. So, that was, for me, it was just pure magic, because it was a head scratcher for me. And I did release a newer version of it later on, which used an Egyptian mummified head as well. And that was really popular, but that was one of my most favorite tricks I've ever seen. If you can call it a trick. It was it was a very interesting performance. Ronnie was Israeli, so it was all kind of, Dan, I will do this trick for you now. And it was all, kind of very mystic, and it had lots of atmosphere. Huge atmosphere, but terrible props. So.
Now, is this still available? Is this one that you still produce?
I've produced it now and again. I've produced it for a few actual stage shows, actually. One in Germany, and I can't remember where the other one, in the States, I think. But it's one of those effects that is probably due for a bit of a refresh. I did a version of it not long ago, and it was called The Devil Made Me Do It. And it was almost like a Zoltan machine. And it was a little devil with a mechanical hand that moved backwards and forwards. And it was exactly the same method. And you would put your 3 cards out in front of the devil, and he would point to each card and reveal them in order, and a little ticket would come out of his mouth with the prediction of the 3 you'd picked. So I think that one's due for another. I only made about my original. I think I was going to make 66 of them that sold for £666. You can see where I'm going with this. But I didn't sell that many. I think I probably only sold about 20 of them. But it's one of those illusions that is almost like on Lebanon Circle. If you're a fan of Lebanon Circle illusions, it's quite mythical, because I never released it to the general public. I just released it to like a few people and made a few of them, and they're out there. But it was so aesthetically, it was really nice as well. It had, instead of legs for the box, it had little goat's legs with hooves. The devil's eyes lit up, his mouth opened, the ticket came out, and he had like this little hand that pointed. So it was just pure 1950s devil, spooky, had the whole Twilight Zone vibe to it. But that was all inspired by that original meeting with Ronnie and him showing me the Skurrot routine. And yeah, and it's simple as well. I think anything that I produce, anybody can perform really, because I have to be able to perform it myself. And I'm not a trained magician. I'm not a stage magician. I'm not even a performer. But if I can perform it, anybody can perform it. But they may not have my storytelling skills. That's probably something that, if I've had a few beers, I'm quite good at telling stories.
Now, people know, obviously this is an Alakazam podcast, but people may not know that Pete does not get to hear these. So Pete and Ardy, obviously my boss and the owner of Alakazam, doesn't hear these until they go out. Now, as you were explaining that, I know that, I'm guessing Pete, if you're listening to this, which I know you are, that is a trick that he will want, because he's a massive fan of the Zoltar machine. So he's a huge fan. We've actually got a small one in the shop. We've got a trick called Zoltar's Opener. He's a massive, massive fan of that sort of thing. So I know straight away he's going to be like, where can I get one of them? So you've already got a fan, I would have said, from that. But that sounds great. And it's the fact that, it obviously had a profound impact on you at the time. For you to carry that on, and it must be so lovely to carry his legacy on in those iterations of it going forward.
Exactly, yeah, because he's almost like he taught me everything I knew really in early days. I was probably sort of 1 foot in bizarre, 1 foot in mentalism, and even though I went to quite a few mentalism style meetings, there was too much number crunching and writing down and stuff for me. There wasn't that spooky element there. And I found it interesting, and I learned a lot from, how certain effects work and methods, which was great. But I kind of stopped going to those. Mentalism wasn't really my sort of side of things. But Ronnie taught me everything I know or inspired me in the bizarre side of things, really, and also introduced me to everybody who I know now as, some of my closest friends in the industry.
Did you ever release any of his other effects that he showed you?
Well, the spirit slates that actually have the sound of the chalk writing was originally his idea. And when they came out originally, they had his original name. They were called Abacus Spiritalis, and he had a set of slates that had the chalk writing. So that was originally his idea. It's just that I kind of just took it a little bit further, changed the design, and over the years keep redesigning or revising the technology. But I do try and make them so when the new technology is available, you can just take the old technology out and put the new one in. You don't have to buy the whole set of slates again. So I try and keep it modular if I can. And, if you want to update it, you can. And if your old set works exactly how you want it to, then, if it isn't broken, why fix it? But there's a few other effects that he did that were very sort of mentalism based. they kind of don't really fit the Lebanon Circle brand. So I would probably just have to release them under a different name, or I don't know. But and I don't really kind of. There's lots of people out there keeping his effects alive besides me, and he's done a lot for me over the years, and it gives other people the opportunity to maybe do something with what he's done. I kind of try and, if I can, use my own ideas now, but it inspired me from the very early days.
Well, we'll all keep an eye out for the reimagining of that, I think. Now, that does lead us to your final choice. So what did you put in number 8?
Number 8 is just a good old book test, but a lazy book test, because, again, I'm just not one of these people that retains really complex methods at all. It's all about simplicity for me. Because I want to use my memory and for my storytelling, trying to remember as much as possible in order to convey a good story. I don't want to be remembering lots of, maybe slights or mnemonics or methods for book reading. And I think it was Bonacek's book test with the ring, where you take a ring and you put it on a page, and as soon as I saw that, I thought, amazing. Can be used with any book. You can have a pile of books. I don't have to remember page numbers or words along pages or any kind of strange methods. There's so many book test methods out there, but the one where Bonacek uses the ring and you just put it. Was it Banachek or Richard Osterland? I can't remember. I think it was Banachek. On another tangent, Ronnie actually bought Banachek around my house in London, which was the house that had the ghost. So I had breakfast with Banachek in my living room, which was kind of another bizarre experience. But yeah, that particular method of forcing a word, for me, it's super clean, super easy. Doesn't need very little setup for it, and it just works. It's simple. I don't have to gaff any books. I don't have to buy a particular gimmicked book. I can just pick a book I like for a particular performance. Dracula, for example. Although I know there is a Dracula book test, but not the one. So yeah, that would be my 8th choice.
You're absolutely right. And another thing that you touched on there, since we're talking about bizarre magic, is the idea that the method, when it comes to bizarre magic, isn't necessarily the most important thing. And the easier it is, the more you get to spend your time on focusing on the performance. And I think that's where bizarre magic is maybe difficult in a different way. So when you think magic, you think the sleight of hand's going to be really difficult. Whereas this isn't about the sleight of hand. It's about how interesting, how engaging, and how on side you're going to get the audience.
Yeah, definitely. It's performing something that's effective, that does the job. It's like you're dipping into your magician's toolbox to just what you need for the story, basically. It's kind of the opposite way around to what normal magicians would operate, I suppose. Less talking and more magic, where bizarre is more talking but less magic. But the magic is important, but it also has to be relatively easy as well. There's more pressure that it has to work as well, I suppose, because if you're only doing maybe one illusion after talking for 10 minutes, then that illusion has to work, really. Whereas if you're a magician who's performing a show that's got 10 illusions, if one of them doesn't quite work out, you can just go to the next one and people forget. But with bizarre, you've got that kind of, the heat is on the thing you're going to do, because if it doesn't work, the whole story kind of falls apart. So
yeah, and I think earlier on when you were talking about the haunted key, I think that's a sign of whether you've done a good job, is whether you get the reaction. Because if you've built up that anticipation, if you've hooked them with your story, if they're really in it, when that key moves, they will react. If they don't react, then the likelihood is it's something within your performance that you need to tweak or change.
I mean, I've even had clients who've bought my illusions that they've not even had to perform the actual trick element of the story because the prop has freaked out the audience so much. You know, say part of a routine, you have to hand a locket to somebody to hold. Some people won't even hold that locket if they think it's genuinely haunted. And then you struggle to find a volunteer to actually even hold that because they're terrified of what it could do. I also had a friend who performed Dolly Darko, and when the time came for the doll to put its arm in the air, its arm actually fell off, but before the point it was meant to. But it fell off and absolutely terrified the whole audience. You know, because it wasn't meant to happen, but it did happen, but it had a very positive effect on the performance, luckily. So
well, I think that's a great one in your final. So let's quickly go back over your list. So we started with Spirit Cabinet, onto Spirit Slates. We had the Corpse Candle, Haunted Effects, but the Haunted Key, Out of This World, Switch Boxes, Scurret, and a lazy book test. I think it's everything that I could have wanted from a Dan Baines list and more. But you do still have 3 things, Dan. So obviously we gave you 8 tricks, but you're only allowed 1 each of these. So I want you to imagine that you are going to dig a big sandy hole on your island. We're going to throw something inside. I want you to tell me what you would banish from our industry.
I am terrified of people singing unannounced. I hate it. And if a magician starts singing throughout their performance, it makes my blood run cold. So singing magicians for me would be, they'd be in that pit quicker than you could say.
I think that's interesting as well because a lot of people that don't like musical theatre is because the actor just bursts into song. But you've already told us that you're a fan of musicals because you went to Lord of the Rings the musical. So what would make it an inappropriate time to sing during a show for you?
Well, the thing is, if you go to a musical, right, the giveaway is there. It's a musical. You know you're going to get a bit of singing. But I went to a performance once. I won't say where, but it was a talent show, and this woman came out on stage, and everyone else thought it was a really touching performance. But for me, my hands were sweating. I started to phase out a little bit, and it made me feel so uncomfortable. But she did a card routine while singing at the same time. And I wasn't expecting it, and it just threw me off. And it's one of those things, you can be in a restaurant with your wife, for example, and some guy will come up and start singing next to you. I hate it. And so singing in magic is a definite no-no for me.
Well, Dan, you'll be pleased to know... I'm joking. Right, that's great. So, singing unannounced is gone. That leads us onto your book, Dan. So, if you were to take a book with you to your island, what book are you taking?
I would say it would be probably only one of the very few magic books I own, and it's an odd one. It's the Dunninger's Magic Encyclopedia. It's the one with all the drawings in. And one of my best mates in magic, Sav the Deceptionist, showed it me once, and I just love all of the quirky artwork and ideas that quite clearly 90% of them would never work in real life. But it's one of those inspirational books that I can just kind of look through. If I'm having a bit of writer's block one day, I'll just leaf through the book, and I'll find potential ideas in there. So that would be my book that I would take away with me.
Okay, well, you mentioned that half the ideas just wouldn't work. I think we've had this book mentioned before, but I found a lot of the old bizarre manuscripts that you buy nowadays. It's either it wouldn't work, or it's very illegal to do it nowadays, which I find really interesting. The amount of chemicals that's in bizarre magic that Just no. You just don't mix them. Don't do it.
Like napalm, yeah. Although I did make one of the tricks in the Dunninger book actually work, which was a séance effect. And like if you go through it, there's a picture, like the little drawing of a man holding a policeman's whistle over a table, and the whistle blows back in response to questions. But I did make a version of that works, which you can also download for free on my website. It's called Whistle and I'll Come to You, and it involves a nautical bosun's call and a lot of plastic tubing and a one of those lens cleaners for a camera. But it does work. It does work. So you can get a whistle to respond in séance situations. But yeah, that was kind of a challenge. I will make one of these effects work.
Okay, so you started by saying that. Normally we don't do this, but because it's sort of a Halloween special and we have you here, you said that it's one of the only magic books that you would take with you. So I also know, because I have a bookshelf next to me with a couple of these sorts of books on there, you do get prop making books and stagecraft books and stuff like that. So if you could take a book, just a book in general, what is the book that you would take with you? Would it be a craft book, or would it be a story book, or what would you take?
I do like a good book of ghost stories, because that's where I'll get my ideas from. Or a book. Okay, one of my favourite books is called 3 Men in Search of Monsters by Nick Redfern, which is a bit like Scooby-Doo. It's just 3 guys who go all over England, going to different places of paranormal activity, or, pursuing cryptids and things like that. And it's just like an adventure book and an investigation into the world of the paranormal. And it's a book I've read probably 3 times, which I can say I've not really read. That is the only book I've read 3 times. But it's not really related to magic, but it has lots of little interviews with people who've experienced lots of weird things. And it's all these little incidents and these stories that really fuel my imagination for potential new releases. So that, I would say that is my favourite book. I actually bought it from a bookshop at Ground Zero in New York, not long after the bombing, not long after the towers came down, to be honest. So it's kind of got a memory in that respect. But it's just one of those books that if I'm feeling a bit, a writer's block, I'll pick that up, I'll have a read, and all of a sudden I'll get all these kind of little ideas popping back up in my mind, or it will just reignite old ideas that I've forgotten about.
Amazing. Right, so we're going to do a rare thing, and we're going to let you take 2 books. I don't think I've done that for anyone on this podcast, so you get to take both of them, okay? Just don't tell anyone else that we've done that.
I won't.
They're all going to want to do it.
Secret safe.
So we've got one last thing, which is your item. Now, the interesting thing with this one is people tend to struggle with this one. But because you craft things and make things, I think there's an untold amount of things that you could take in this position.
There is. Yeah, I've got so many items. I'm kind of spoiled for choice, really. Okay, I've got and it's something that I am going to turn into an effect or a prop eventually, and it's an original Bellarmine witch bottle. Which, for people who don't know, witch bottles were like a small Bellarmine jar. So it's almost like a light bulb, upside down shape, with a picture of a bearded man. And inside you would put things like rusty nails, urine, all sorts of lovely things. And then you would bury them on your property, and it would keep witches away. So I've got one of those, an original one of those. And I would take that. Because touch wood, since I've had it, I've not experienced anything too spooky or scary, so it's obviously doing its job. And if the house is going to burn down, then I'm going to take it with me. A Bellarmine jar. So in terms of prop design as well, I just love it. There's an effect in there somewhere. I've not quite figured it out yet, but I keep looking at it, and one day, one will appear on the Lebanon Circle site that, I don't know, a spirit materializes from it, or, a sound comes from it, or who knows?
So do you know what's in your Bellarmine Witch bottle? Do you know
it's
what's
actually
in
empty?
it?
Yeah, this one's empty. So a lot of them, when they're found, because builders usually find them when they're renovating buildings, and of course the first thing, you get a builder, oh, what's inside, and they open it up and just tip out the contents. So
yeah, I heard
mine is empty.
There was a podcast recently, and there was a lady who's renovating her house in a town where they used to do witch trials, and they found lots of these sorts of jars and bottles in the wall, and some of them had human remains. So, of course, the police had to come in to check that it was authentic and stuff, and the council have agreed that those jars and artifacts cannot leave that house because they're afraid of what will happen if they're taken out. So when you go to this lady's hallway, she's got this lovely renovated house, but just this glass cabinet with these creepy things on the wall that they just will not take out because, people are so afraid of taking things away with them.
Yeah, it's like the mummified cats. You find a lot of those, especially down in Kent. So I do have an effect with a mummified cat, actually. So that is on the cards, but it's quite dangerous. So I've got to figure out how I'm going to do it properly. So not figured that out yet.
Oh, God. Okay, so let's go back over your list. So we started with the spirit cabinet, then to spirit slates, the corpse candle. We did haunted effects, but a haunted key, out of this world, switch boxes, scurret. We did a lazy book test. Your banishment is singing unannounced. Your books are Dungeons Complete Encyclopedia of Magic and 3 Men in Search of Monsters. And your item is a Bellarmine Witch bottle. I think in terms of a Halloween special, we're not going to do much better than that, are we?
I don't think so, no.
Now, Dan, if people want to find out more about you, about Doomsday, about the East Coast Spirit Sessions, about everything Dan Baines, where can they go to?
Okay, well, if you just go to Google and type in Dan Baines Mummified Fairy, there's probably in the region of over 100,000 hits, which you're going to come across. But if you just want to cut out all of that, you can just go to danbaines.com, which is my artist website. And that will have information on if I'm running any courses or if I'm appearing anywhere or if I'm doing podcasting. Or if you just want to have a look at the magic stuff I produce, you just need to go to lebanonsircle.co.uk. And I'm also on Instagram. Just look for Lebanon Circle on Instagram. So I'll post on there quite regularly. Usually, if I'm in the studio, I'll take a few snaps of bits I'm working on. And so Doomsday is doomsdaygathering.com. Or just type in Doomsday Derby. You will find information on where to buy tickets. And as I say, I'm there next year in the capacity of just like the artistic director. So I designed the trophy for the Hex Factor, which is the talent competition. And next year I will also have a trader stand there as well, which is something I've never done at Doomsday because I've always been too busy running around. But next year I will have a trader stand. So I'll have more time to actually just talk to people.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Dan. I know that you're very busy making mummified things, so it's been great to finally have you on here.
Thanks, and happy Halloween.
Yes, happy Halloween. So wherever you are today, obviously it is Halloween as we are sending this out. So wherever you are, I hope you've had a great time. I hope you've done some Halloween shows. The past couple of days, we're actually recording this, at the beginning of October, and the past couple of days I've just been inundated with people saying, I've got a Halloween show, I need to do something, what can I do? So hopefully lots of people are doing lots of Halloween shows, which is great. So wherever you are, I hope you are enjoying this time of the year. Do go check out Dan's site, obviously. Do go check out Doomsday. Check out everything Dan Baines because his props really are absolutely phenomenal. And obviously if you're there, go up to him and let him know that you heard the podcast, and I'm sure he'll appreciate that you've done that. If any of you are having any scary experiences that have one of Dan's products, do let us know, because we love a ghost story on here. Dan's already creeped us all out, let's be honest, with the bed. And I'm not sure if you guys picked up on this, but at the end he said he keeps his Bellarmine witch bottle, right? And he says that he keeps it because nothing too scary has happened. But he tells us the story about the bed and the things flying around in the house, and he says that's not too scary. So, define what you think's scary. I don't want any of it, quite frankly. So there we go. But do get in contact with him if you find out anything. And of course, we're going to be back next week with another episode. So until then, have a great week. Bye-bye.
When I perform at gigs, I look at effects that tick these 3 boxes. Is it super strong and powerful? Yes. Will it last with your spectators for a lifetime? Absolutely. And does it leave them with a souvenir that perfectly captures the moment of magic? If that all sounds exactly what you're after, look no further than the liquid forks. These forks have been custom designed to be able to bend right in front of your spectators' eyes. It's so easy to perform, it's so visual, and trust me, they will honestly keep this impossible object because they've seen it morph in front of their eyes. It literally does the impossible. Not only that, Liquid Forks comes with 50 of these forks in each pack, and it comes with the full Liquid Forks routine taught by the world famous David Penn. Not only that, we have a subscription service. If you guys love these forks and you get through them at your gigs, we now offer a monthly subscription where you get sent a box through every single month at a 10% reduced fee. Like I said, you guys are going to be loving these. You're going to be performing them every chance you can. Trust me, the reactions are second to none. So guys, head over to alakazam.co.uk, pick up a set of Liquid Forks. You will not regret it. Easy to do. Leaves them with a killer souvenir. And to be honest with you, it's not cards, it's not coins, it's not mentalism. It's something beyond belief. Check it out now, guys, the Liquid Forks.